There's a coconut for the restless waves in the Lord. Send the Lord. There are souls to rescue. There are souls to sing. Send the Lord. Send the Lord. Send the Lord. The blessed gospel. Let it shine from shore to shore. Send the Lord. The blessed gospel. Let it shine forevermore. We have heard the Macedonian call today. Send the Lord, send the Lord. And the gold ring offering with the cross we lay. Send the Lord, send the Lord, send the Lord. The blessed gospel light, let it shine from shore to shore. Send the Lord, the blessed gospel, let it shine forevermore. Let us not go weary in the work of love. Send the Lord, send the Lord. Let us gather jewels from the crown above. Send the Lord, send the Lord, send the Lord. The blessed gospel, let it shine from shore to shore. Send the Lord, the blessed gospel, let it shine forevermore. Great. You know what? I need to get my briefcase on the other side. Okay, so today is for me missionary of the past day. So you get a slideshow about a famous missionary of the past, and let's have you turn to Isaiah 54. Isaiah 54, and I read Isaiah 54. And this was the missionary chose this particular passage as why he felt it was very important to go into the mission field in India. So I read this passage and I just didn't see it, but I guess if we read it very slowly, we'll pick up more on it. Let's see if there's any announcements I have to make. Let's see. So for those of you who are teaching Sunday school from now on and Chinese school will end at 40. Okay, so I believe it's 10:40. And the messages in church here have to end by 30, which means we have to sing the song and finish by 30. So we always start ahead of the schedule. And I'm moving this over. Sean, can you bring down the thing? Because I know I'm going to speak on a missionary. So today I'm going to be speaking, let's look at Isaiah 54, verse 2 and 3. And the first time I read it, it didn't make sense. The second time I read it, still didn't make sense. But if you read more of it, you might see more sense. So the missionary that I'm covering today is William Carey. And William Carey was a missionary back in 1771. Okay. The last time I spoke on the missionary of Brainerd, David Brainerd. You remember him? Okay. And he was one of the first missionaries in the year 1600. So that's 100 years before. Okay, great. You can hold it. So let's look at Isaiah 54, verse 2 to 3. And I might ask you guys in the audience, how does this apply to the missionary field? Because I would read it and say, oh, I don't see it. And then you read it more. Oh, yeah, I guess I see it. Enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations. Spare not cords and strengthen thy stakes. For thou shalt break forth on the right hand and on the left, and thy seed shall inherit the Gentiles and make desolate the cities to be inhabited. So let's bow for a word of prayer. Dear God, we want to thank you that we can study this missionary, and hopefully we can apply what he did to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. William Carey was a missionary, and his goal was to reach India. He was probably the first to reach India. And back then, no one wanted to reach the Indians because if you go to India, you have to learn their language, which is not easy. And I don't think the Hindi people liked it, and I really don't think the Muslim people liked it. And I think probably what's worse is diseases. So, Shan, when you went to India, do you have to take any precautions, shots before going there?
Supposed to, I did not.
Okay, so I had to get 10 shots. Okay, and also, do you concern yourself about malaria?
I was not.
Okay, so you didn't take any malaria pills? The first time I did. Okay, and then after a while you get used to it. You know, you're not going to catch it. So the disease of malaria was really prevalent there back then, more so than today. So why don't we look at the first slide? So can someone just turn the volume? And if I'm lucky, I can get this line down. Okay, thank you. And it takes time. So while we're waiting, William Carey was the first missionary to India, and I almost would want to say almost the first missionary to go to the third world. Okay, back then no one, back then Christianity only stayed in Europe, and then it spread to America. Okay, and then no one reached the un-Christian areas. The first person that reached the un-Christian area was in the Americas. Someone said, "Hey, we need to reach the Indian people in India." So, as for those of you who don't know, I'm assuming everyone knows where India is now. Where's my pointer? Okay, there it goes. So, we can give Madison joy. Madison, can you point out where India is? Well, you have to come up here. Otherwise, that's correct from your distance. Okay, very good. Okay. India is, back then, let's go to the next slide. Okay, India. Back then, India is called the subcontinent. It looks like at the time it was larger than Europe. And India included India, Sri Lanka, included Pakistan, included Bangladesh. And the reason India was divided after 1940s is this is the Hindu section, and these two are the Muslim sections. Okay, and so basically, William Carey says, you know what? No one's reaching the people of India. Shouldn't we reach everybody? And so let's look at Isaiah 54, verse 2, and let's see how he got this missionary call from this verse, which I find it difficult. But I guess he says, look, enlarge the place of thy tent. Okay, so in his interpretation, Christianity has been enlarged by the Apostle Paul. And Christianity basically reached Europe and the European colonies like America and Canada. And let's look at the verse again. Enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine inhabitants. Spare not, lengthen the cords, and straighten thy stakes. For thou shalt break forth on the right and on the left, that thy seed will inherit the Gentiles, and shall make desolate the cities to be inhabited. Okay, so his interpretation is the Gentiles are the unreached people, and the Europeans who have Christianity are the God's chosen people. And I do believe that after Israel rejected Jesus Christ, God had to find another line, and he did choose the Europeans through Paul and Peter and all the apostles to preach the gospel. So I memorized some stats about India. India, let's go back one slide. They call India the subcontinent. So which is larger, Europe or India? And the answer is, of course, Europe is larger. So let's go back to India. India is, I believe, the seventh most largest country in the world. So let me give you a perspective. Number one is Russia. Number two, Canada. Number three, United States. Four, China. Five, Brazil. Six, Australia. Seven, India. Eight, Argentina. And nine, Kazakhstan. 10, Sudan. According to Wikipedia. But recently, Wikipedia has changed a couple of things. The United States has always been number 3. Now, all of a sudden, Wikipedia is saying the United States is number 4. And the reason is because Wikipedia wants to operate in Communist China, and Communist China says you did not include the land from Taiwan as part of China. And then Wikipedia says, okay, China gets to be number 3 because they don't want their site to be shut down. So, I'm going to just say one more thing before I go to India. How large is actual India? And I'm going to ask people in the audience, which is larger? Okay, so it has nothing to do with India, but I'm going to ask Henry in the back row. Henry, which is larger, Russia or Antarctica? Take a guess. You got a 50-50 guess. Yeah, you got it right. Okay. So Amy gets the next one. Which is larger, India or Greenland?
Greenland.
So unfortunately, the Europeans drew the map to make Europe look very big, and they drew Greenland to look larger than South America. In reality, Greenland is 1/3 the size of Australia. If you look at the map, it looks like Greenland's larger than Australia. So India is larger than Greenland. So it should give you a perspective. Is there anything else I want to say about Greenland? Yes. Greenland is smaller than the Congo. Okay. But Greenland is larger than Saudi Arabia. Okay, so that should give you. So here we are. We have William Carey. He wants to reach an area. This is just India without Pakistan. I didn't even do my stats, how large it is with Pakistan and with Bangladesh, on how large India was back when William Carey was the missionary. William Carey let's look at the next one. Okay, here's India. And for those of you who don't know the map of India, which I expect nobody to know except for Shang. Shang, did anyone here besides Shang go to India? Okay. Shang, what city did you go to?
Delhi, Mumbai.
Delhi and Mumbai, right? Okay. So I will show you Delhi because I went to Delhi. Okay. It's right there. Okay. But Shang, can you point where Mumbai is? You can come up here.
I actually don't know exactly where it is.
That's okay. I have a feeling you're going to be within, 1,000 miles within the correct. Yeah, that's right. Somewhere around here. Okay. I haven't been to Mumbai, but back then India was cut up into many sections. You had British India, you had French India, you had Danish India, you had Portuguese India. And let me just give you a picture of what happened. Back after World War II, India was given their independence. India was cut up into Bangladesh and Pakistan. But British India still existed. And the Brits eventually said to Gandhi, yes, you get your country back. But there were two other countries that would not give India back. France would not give back India. And the French section of India is called Pondicherry, okay, somewhere down here. Then you have Portuguese India. You can think of Portuguese India as Macau in China, okay? And I don't know if you know this, but the French used to have Shanghai, okay? So Portuguese India was in this area. Then in the 1950s, finally, France says, okay, you get French India back. And then in the 1960s, India just marched into Portuguese India, Goa, and just took Portuguese India, okay? So the only reason I mentioned there was British India, Portuguese India, French India, Danish India is because when William Carey had to reach India, he was only allowed to go to what section of India? British India. And the other point I want to mention is what was the capital of India back in the 1700s when William Carey wanted to be a missionary? Well, the capital today is Delhi. Okay, when you go to India, they call it Delhi. They don't call it New Delhi, but of course, when you go there, there's an old Delhi. So the capital is right here. Okay, at Calcutta. Okay, the Brits found it very easy to sail their ships, drop people off, and this is their capital. Can you imagine how difficult it is for the Brits to come all the way up to New Delhi to make their capital? Of course, after the Indians regained their independence, they made their capital Delhi. So I just want to say one more thing. This province right here, the whole thing used to be called Bengali. Okay? So when the Muslim section separated, they called themselves, well, since we're part of Bengali, we are Muslim Bengali, we'll call ourselves Bangladesh. But there is still today Hindu Bengali. Okay? And let me continue. What's the next slide? Okay, and the Indian flag, next slide. Okay, there we are. Thank you. William Carey. So this is what I expect you guys to think. Every time you hear somebody named Carey, you'll say, oh yes, I know a missionary named Carey. So the only famous person I know today with the last name Carey is it Jim Carrey? Is he the comedian? Yeah, Jim Carrey, the actor. So every time you hear the name Jim Carrey, what should come in your mind is, oh, I remember there was a great man better than Jim Carrey named William Carey. William Carey, he was born very, very poor. And I noticed in history, sometimes the poorest people are the best evangelists. People who are aristocratic, who are rich, why do they want to reach other people? He was so poor that his job was cobbler, okay? And for those of you who don't know what cobbler, and actually I'm going to ask Eric. Eric, what is a cobbler?
Shoes.
Yeah, very good. Okay. So he just made shoes. So he really saw no life for himself. And if he stayed cobbler, a lot of people wouldn't be reached. So when he was 16 years old, he actually got saved, and he saw life differently. He said, "You know what? I was always unsaved. Now I'm saved. Now it's my responsibility to win others. Now you're not going to win others in England because everyone thinks they're a Christian in England." He says, "Shouldn't somebody bring the gospel to India? Since England owned India, wasn't that their responsibility?" And I'll give you some. At 16, he got saved, and at 20, he got married. Now that's really young, okay, compared to in America today. He married. So he was a cobbler, right? And he had to work for a master. So he married the relative of his master. Okay, and I think that relative was a lay pastor. So he basically married a pastor's daughter. When he was 24, he became a pastor of a church in England, And when you become a pastor in church in England, you basically don't get anyone saved because everybody's saved. So isn't it kind of pointless to be a pastor anywhere when no one needs to get saved? In America, constantly people need to get saved. And he got a second job because back then being a pastor means you got paid nothing. It's almost like here, right? So you serve, you get paid nothing. He got a second job, and he read the books written by famous people, old missionaries. Okay, and I mentioned last time I spoke on David Brainerd, the great missionary in the 1600s. So he was, now remember, he lives in the 1700s. He's reading about what David Brainerd did, how he reached the so-called Native Americans or American Indians, and how David Brainerd, just anyone remember how young he was when he died? He was 35 years old. Okay, he caught TB, and it was almost required reading for all missionaries to read what David Brainerd did, so you understand what the life of a missionary is. You live in the middle of the wilderness. You get sick. There's no money, and he read another book, The Journeys of Captain Cook. So I will ask people in the audience, who is Captain Cook? So, Fanny, do you know who Captain Cook is? Okay, Shang?
Sailor that around the world.
Yeah, he circled around the world. And what did he discover in particular that was famous for? What region of the world or continent? What?
Didn't he discover Australia?
Yeah, okay. So Captain Cook, he discovered Australia, he's discovered New Guinea, he's discovered the Hawaiian Islands. The Cook Islands are named after him. His goal is to reach the world. So if you read Isaiah 54, it seems kind of consistent. Verse number 2, Captain Cook, enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thy habitation, spare not, lengthen thy cords, and strengthen thy stakes. So he says, look, Captain Cook, his job was to explore the world. And Captain Cook was followed by a missionary many years later. His name is John Williams, okay? Just like the other name, John Williams, who wrote all the music for Star Wars and Indiana Jones. I was reading a little bit more about John Williams because I was doing research on what island did John Williams get killed. And what happened was he was trying to reach the natives there, and he got clubbed to death, and they ate his body. But the name of the island is Vanuatu. But once a year, the people of Vanuatu today celebrate John Williams Day. They honor him for bringing the gospel to their island. So he's reading about the writings of David Brainerd, Captain Cook. I don't know his first name. He says, we need to reach out, just like in the verse right here. Captain Cook, enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thy habitations. So then he came up with a motto, and it's not from the Bible, but it says, attempt great things for God, expect great things from God. Okay. And I thought that might be a verse from the Bible. I couldn't find it. His wife's name is Dorothy. They have 3 kids. And let's go to the next slide. Okay, so there he is. He's a cobbler. I guess he's staring out the window thinking about the world. And I don't know if the artist, you guys notice what the artist is doing in the background? So Gibson, what's happening in the background of this picture? Yeah, there's a map of the world. So is this planted here? Did he really have a map of the world staring out as he was thinking about reaching the world? And what do you think is wrong with the map of the world, Gibson? So I'll tell you what I think is wrong with the map, okay? So I know you guys don't know this, but Australia was not discovered by Captain Cook until pretty close to 1620. So does that fit? Yeah, it does, because William Carey is 1761. Okay, but not everything was explored back then. We didn't know there was this Tasmania and other islands. Okay, next slide. So my next question is, okay, he also taught school. What's wrong with this picture? Okay, let's see if you have a good memory. Andrew, what's wrong with this picture? Okay, so you have to have a really good memory of the last slide. Okay, so I'll just ask one more person, and I expect no one to get it, but I got it. Okay, sometimes these artists may not draw it. Does anyone see what's wrong with this picture? Wait, you see it, Andrea?
I don't know. I was just wondering why his hair black.
Oh, my question is, why does he have hair? Let's go back to the last slide.
Okay.
So if he's a cobbler, what is it? When you serve God, all of a sudden, let's go to the next slide. When you serve God, all of a sudden you grow hair. Okay, so I always look at these pictures and look at the artistic license of their interpretation. So I guess this artist wanted to show that he knew his geography. He points to India, and he grows hair at the same time. Okay, so if you want to be a missionary, you will grow hair according to this picture. So he says to his wife, he has 3 kids now. He says to his wife, God has called me to go to India. And you know what was the response of the wife? I'm not going. I don't want to go to India. So I know Andrea wasn't here earlier, but how many shots do you have to get to go to India today? Okay, so I asked Shang earlier, and so do you remember how many shots I mentioned? Yeah, 10 shots. Okay, so back then you couldn't get the shots, and therefore it means many diseases. So I remember I had to get, and most of you guys already have these 10 shots. A lot of the times I'll talk to my patients going to Africa or India, and they'll say, how many shots do you get? And I would say, well, 10 shots, but you already got most of these shots. So let's see if you got these shots. Did you guys get your 3 for hepatitis B? Okay, so you're already 30% there. Did you get your 2 for hepatitis A? Okay, you're halfway there. And then you have tetanus, okay, yellow fever, which you did not get, typhoid, malaria, and I can't remember the rest. Okay, smallpox doesn't exist anymore. Oh, that reminds me. This month I had to go to Walgreens and get the monkeypox shot. Okay, so why did I have to get the monkeypox shot? So in Africa, unfortunately, 2 years ago, only gay men got monkeypox. The disease has mutated where it attacks children now. That's terrible. So I need to get my second monkeypox before I go. So the wife says, no, I'm not going to India. Look at all the diseases. Okay, someone's going to die. We have 3 kids. So I would love to ask the audience, how many here would actually subject their 3 kids in dying in India? So he says, I don't care what you say, I am going anyway. And she had one more good reason for not going to India. Okay, she says, I'm expecting. So who would want to go to India when you're expecting on a boat? So I need to give Dorothy credit. It's like, if I were Dorothy, I would not go to India. So he goes on India himself. And when he's 33, he leaves his wife. I know it sounds bad. And took the 5-month journey to go all the way around to India. Okay. And then he gets there. He has no money. And no one's funding the missionary. Okay. That we fund missionaries. So he works. He had a friend who owned a indigo factory, and he says, "Look, you can help, work in my indigo factory." So he works in the indigo factory, and finally, the wife has the baby and says, "Okay, let's all go to India." I just want to say this, and I really want you guys to think about it. So, a lot of times, I live in America and I complain. Look at that. We always have something to complain about. Okay, it's like, well, look, I got to do this and that, win people, run a business, care for other people, run a school, And then I look at these missionaries, and I haven't even seen what they lost. Once I see what they lose, it's like, wow, I have no comparison. I was visiting a missionary in Burkina Faso. He has a son, a daughter, and a daughter. Okay, and I was being bitten by malaria mosquitoes left and right. And this is where I'm going to pick someone in the audience and see what you would do. So I think I mentioned this before. His son, his name is Nathan, and he caught malaria and he died. So I will ask people in the audience, do you think it's time for the missionary Stephen Knickerbocker to come home? Okay, if you were that missionary, would you come home? My answer is, if I'm that missionary, I would say to God, I think I've already paid my dues. Okay, so I'm going to ask Judy, would you come back after your son dies?
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Is there anyone who would not come back after your son dies? That's too much of a high price. I couldn't bear that. And he's still there. And I didn't want to say to Stephen, well, aren't you concerned about the other two dying? Right? That's why I pray for my missionaries, okay, in these dangerous areas. So his wife leaves with the baby, and the babies get bitten by malaria all the time. And the three kids, and they have no money. He works in an indigo factory, and at 5 years old, the oldest son dies. Okay, so I'm going to ask Lolita. Okay, you are William Carey. Your oldest son dies. Do you think you can come back now? Yeah, and he doesn't. And he goes to. I mentioned he goes to Calcutta, which is in Bengali. He translates the Bible into Bengali. By the way, India has, like 10 major languages, maybe 50 minor languages. So you're not going to reach all of India. So the major languages, Hindi and Punjabi and Bengali. I can't name them all, okay? I just know when I'm in that country, oh yeah, it's another language. So he translates it into just the New Testament into Bengali and the New Testament into Hindi. Now, someone needs to correct me. I always get the word Hindi and Hindu confused. Which is the religion and which is the language? Does anyone want to help me here? Hindu is a religion, right? Hindi is the language? Okay, thank you. He translates it into Hindi. Thank you. And I never asked somebody whether the two languages look alike. And so he's 33 years old. He loses a son. He translates the Bible. And when he's 40 years old, how many Indians were in his church? Okay, 40 years old. So this is 7 years. How many Indians were in his church? And I'll say lower. that's the game I play. Okay, Sharon, how many Indians do you think was in his church after 7 years? Oh, she's pretty close. Okay. I would say one. One. So, isn't it time to quit now? Okay. So, I'm gonna ask Sharon. So you lose a son. You don't want to lose the other kids. You're there for 7 years. God, hasn't He paid His dues yet? When you come home, yeah. So, 40 years old. And so who attends his church? Basically white people, white British people saying, well, okay, I'll show up to your church, four white people and one Indian. And finally, when he's 41 years old, he starts a school, okay? And after he starts a school, I think I wrote down 11 got saved. Okay, that's pretty good. And what do you think he taught at his school? He taught English. Okay, so who wouldn't go? Then when he's 51 years old, his wife dies. Okay, so I'm going to ask Maggie next. So your son dies, your wife dies. Isn't it time to come home now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anyone who can say, that their life is as hard as his. Let's look at the next slide. Okay, and this is what India looks like. It looks dirty. It looks filled with diseases. Next slide. So he learns Bengali and he learns Hindi, and he lost his hair all of a sudden again. And next slide. Then he translates it. And next slide. Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So his son dies, his wife dies, and he still won't leave. He's very determined. So he's 57, and he establishes his school starts really growing, his English class, and his service starts growing, and he actually got 600 saved. Okay, and he went beyond. Everybody here, no one wants to continue when your wife dies and your child dies. And at 58, he decides to start a pastor school for Indians, okay, and a college. And of course, after that, tons of people are getting saved. I was conversing with a missionary. Oh yeah, I can't even mention his name. Okay, our good missionary, his name is Eugene, and he has a Bible college in China, and their church is being raided all the time. They can't meet at one place; they meet in all houses. And he was asking for support for the graduates. The graduates are going to go to different sections of China, and he gave me their names in English because he can't give the Chinese names, otherwise, they'll be arrested. Of course, we're going to support them. Okay, so this guy, William Carey, he starts a school and has a pastor school and lots of pastors. Oh, let's look at this. What did he preach? So he translated the Bible. He's preaching, and then what in the world is that? Fire burning. So does anyone know what happens in India if your husband dies? You burn your wife alive. So he stops that. He says, this is crazy. This is not God's way. And that's kind of shocking, isn't it? I'm not sure if they still practice that today. So this one, life's achievement, I think that's a big life achievement right there. Life achievement, he's preaching to the Indians. I don't know what he's doing here, but there's a building on the top. So I'm going to have you guess what this building might be. Okay, so Benny, what do you think that building might be? Okay, it's not heaven. Okay, yeah.
His school?
Yeah, his college was very good. So let's look at the next slide. Okay, by the way, yeah, he's a Baptist. Okay, he believes in baptism by immersion. And does anyone see something wrong with this picture? Okay, so James, what's wrong with this picture? Yeah, he has hair again. Okay, so I'm always entertained. Okay, next slide. So he starts off in a house. Does anyone notice that this school doesn't look like the one that Benny pointed out? Okay, so the reason is because he started here, but they got a better building. When he's 64 years old, I forgot to mention this. I better write this down next time. Remember I said his wife dies, right? What do you think he does right after that? He gets married again. Okay. So he gets married again, and when he hits 64, his second wife dies. This guy really lives a long time. I'm sure he's been bitten by the malaria, right? He never dies. Everyone else around him dies. Okay, let's go to the next slide because I know I have to end by 30. Okay, he loses his hair again, but he has a college. And do I have a slide after that? Oh, okay, this is really fast. This is what an Indian meal looks like. There's no meat in it. You only eat one meal a day, and I actually survived on one meal a day. Okay, and I didn't even feel hungry. This looks like slop. I mean, can anyone say they can survive on this for the whole day? Let's go really fast. Next slide. This is the India Gate in Delhi. Next slide. This is the Hindu temples that he had to confront. Next slide. This is a Muslim temple. You can tell, very Muslim. And I think it's called Fort Delhi. Next slide. Or the Red Fort. This is another religion, the Sikh religion. Next slide. This is near Agra, which is near Taj Mahal. Next slide. And this is Fort Agra. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Next slide. This is Fort, anyway, the Red Fort. Next slide. Did you go to these places, Shang? Okay, well, next time. Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, now we're going to Taj Mahal, which is a mosque. Okay, next slide. Okay, let's end off with that. So we're not going to show any more. So I want to say this. William Carey dies at 73, which is a long time. He reaches lots of people. And his influence not just reached India, but it reached the entire Western thought that if he can do well in India and reach, thousands of people, this is how missionaries work. So he wrote, this is what missionaries do. He read Brainerd, he read Cook, and now everybody's reading William Carey. So let's bow for a word of prayer. Okay, dear God, these people paid sacrifices really big. We complain when we have small difficulties. I personally studied his life, and I said, wow, he's way, it's an inspiration for me. And please, God, let this be an inspiration for the rest of us as we continue to support our missionaries around the world. We want to thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, what's the last song you're singing? Send the Light was a good song. Oh, yeah, let's bring this up. So, the last song is before orchestra practice 413. That reminds me. So, Amy, I think I have trumpet and violin in the same seat. And everyone has a seat with their music on it. Just sit on your knee and never move it. And then no one will not know where not to go. What's that last song? 413. And we can get the song in. Oh, stand up for Jesus. Well, he definitely did. Okay, let's have an intro. Stand up for Jesus. He so tries on the cross. With hearts running, it marks not suffer loss. From victory unto victory, his army shall he lead. Till every foe is vanquished, and Christ is Lord indeed. Stand up for Jesus, the trumpet call obey. For to the mighty God, in this his glorious day, he that been now served against thunder foe, and courage was within, and strength to strength above. Stand up for Jesus, his strength alone. The arm of flesh will fail you, he dare not trust your own. But on God's arm, and watch ye unto prayer, and duty was ordained, he never wanting there. Okay, great. So I will dismiss all of you guys together, Chinese school, orchestra, everybody. So let's see. Is there anything else I need to mention? No. Oh. Amen. Amen. So I remember last week I said 41, yes. But maybe by the end of the year, we'll actually hit that 45. So continue praying. Okay, you guys are dismissed. Thanks. And next time I'll do this in 3D.